Christian Parenting.
Hi, Melanie. Welcome to the Christian Parenting Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're going to be here. I know our conversation is going to be incredible. It's going to be really, but before we just dive into it, we have to know you, because that's how we start getting to know you and your family, because this is Christian Parenting. So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and then tell us about your family too.
Okay. My name is Melanie. I live in San Antonio, Texas. I've been married to my husband, Perry, for 28 years. We have an only child, Caroline, who is 21. She's a senior at Texas A&M University and is graduating in May. Don't blink or you'll miss it. It goes fast. But I am an author. I am a podcaster. I'm a speaker, and I'm just super happy to be here with y'all today.
I have to tell you that so right before we started recording this podcast, I was at my kid's school for the Christmas pageant, and it's the elementary Christmas pageant. And I was sitting there realizing that next year is my last elementary Christmas pageant.
Yeah.
And I'm done. I'm going to have middle schoolers and up.
Yeah.
It went by too fast.
It does. But it does go by fast. But here's what I will tell you. And I really do mean this. It's funny because you can't imagine it at the time, but I do not miss the elementary Christmas school pageants. Every season to me gets better and better. I love this season of parenting. It's different, but it's so rewarding. I don't know. There's something about it that I wouldn't trade. I had a friend the other day that was like, oh, it's the high school homecoming and all that stuff. And she was like, and I know I'm going to miss it. And I was like, I'll be honest. I really don't miss it. It's funny the things you think you're going to miss that you don't as much.
That's probably fair. And I don't really miss a ton of things about the littler years. I think I've said this multiple times on the podcast, but those just were not my favorite. This so far is my favorite. So I'm like, no, I'm going to miss it all. I'm going to miss it.
No, but it keeps getting better. It keeps getting better.
Which it's supposed to.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the purpose of family, for it to continue to grow and strengthen, right? It doesn't end.
No, and it really does. And there's something rewarding about having adult kids, because you get to see they did listen to a lot of things I said, or they have turned into wonderful human beings. I don't know. It's the reward of all the blood, sweat, and tears you're pouring in now.
Yeah. Yes. I do look forward to that. It'll be a sweet time. Okay. So you have to describe your family in one word or phrase.
I mean, I think, listen, this is not the most spiritual of words, but we're funny. I mean, that would be, we're just all three of us. We are a family that prioritizes humor. We love dry humor. We love dark humor. We are just funny. We laugh a lot when we're together.
Who is the funniest?
I think Perry, my husband, is probably the funniest. Caroline, to me, is a second. Watching her sense of humor is just, it delights me. It's one of those things as a mom where you're like, I didn't know that I was going to value this so much. But when she, knows how to do a perfectly timed, one-off comment, I'm so proud of that skill.
Yeah. My middle's kind of like that, but he's 10, so he's just learning.
Uh-huh.
And so sometimes it'll be a total miss. And I'm like,
yeah,
funny.
Yeah.
We're like, hey, that was funny, but now we have to go back to being nice.
Yeah. Yeah. It's we have to practice it. We have to hone that skill a little bit.
Yeah. He's working on it, but he is very funny. And it's fun to watch him grow into that a little bit.
Yep.
Even though it's
love
fun
it
along the way, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to talk about relationships, friendship, parenting, trauma, healing. All these things are found in your book, Here Be Dragons, which I already told you has the prettiest cover. I adore it.
Thank you.
And the book is really good too. But I have so many thoughts and questions. I feel like I could have probably a whole series of podcasts on this, because there's just a lot.
Yeah.
So a lot of places we could go. But can you just give us a little summary so that people have just kind of a general understanding of where your heart is, where your story is?
Yeah, so the subtitle for the book is Treading the Deep Waters of Motherhood, Mean Girls, and Generational Trauma. And so, listen, it's just a lighthearted book, as you can tell by that, but it really is the story. And I tried to write it as two things. It's my personal story, but also maybe some sort of roadmap for moms coming up behind me who are dealing with a lot of those dynamics themselves, because it's kind of about my story of the realization that the only way to raise an emotionally and spiritually healthy child is for me to be emotionally and spiritually healthy. So it was the wounds that I had to heal from in order to be the mom that I wanted to be, and to be able to raise a child who was going to be emotionally and spiritually healthy. So that, in a very short summary, is kind of what the book is about.
Yeah. And we start with your mom and then we move into Caroline. There's a lot, but I want to start with us because I love your question, like at the beginning of the book specifically, like why we her. And then the answer is because she's doing the best she can.
Yeah.
And that can mean so many things. And I think we're all doing the best we can given the situation that we've been given, like what we've been in life. And we've all been given things. You've been given a difficult, toxic relationship with your mother. We all have something.
Yeah.
But moms like to be tough. We like to take care of everyone else first, sometimes to the point even of like being a martyr in cases, But today is important, kind of like you said, and also hard to deal with the source of our pain, to deal with this stuff, the emotional, difficult stuff, instead of just pretending that everything's good. I'm going to go take care of everyone else.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard to do because I think number one, it requires, first of all, recognizing that there's something wrong. And I think that is a journey in and of itself, because I think a lot of times it's not until we're adults that you look back and go, this was not a healthy dynamic in my family. Or this is something, and a lot of times it's something you don't even know until maybe you have kids of your own and you think, oh, this is something I don't want to continue. Like, I don't want this trajectory to continue. And so it takes like some self-awareness. And I think you have to decide, do I want to deal with it? Do I want to process it? Do I want to work through it with God and a therapist or whatever it's going to take for you to get emotionally healthy? Do you want to do that? Because it's painful. I mean, I think you're having to admit a lot of things. And I think not only is it painful to dig that stuff up sometimes, but you're also, if you've still got those people in your life, there's going to be a lot of pushback from your family and from loved ones who are going to be like, but this is the way we've always been. I don't know why they make you feel like, you're Taylor Swift, you're the problem. It's you. And it may not be you. So I think you've got to identify it. You've got to be able to set those boundaries. And I think those are really hard to do because I've always heard it said, like, the people in your life, usually where you need to put up the biggest boundaries, are the ones that are going to push back the hardest against those boundaries. So it's a journey. And I think you can truly only do it by the grace of God, because I don't think our inner leaning is, I would like to dig up all this trauma and deal with it today.
Yeah, I would like to pinpoint all the things that are and fix it. And then people about it. Like, I'm going to bring it up with the person who hurt me.
That's it. Yeah, because it's easier to just kind of bury stuff. And I think especially when you're in the years of, where you are, when you're busy with all the elementary school projects and the stuff and the kids and the running, you don't have a lot of time to sit and reflect. I mean, sometimes you're just in autopilot mode too. And so I think that can be hard. And I've seen so many of my friends, as we've become empty nesters and we launched our kids into the world, where you have time kind of once again to do this self-assessment of like, where am I? How am I doing? What's going on with me emotionally and spiritually?
Yeah. Especially as my kids are getting older, I'm realizing how many of their experiences are like triggering for me.
Yeah.
Because we see ourselves in our kids. And
for sure.
I can be brought right back to middle school or elementary school, like in an instant, when I hear stories from my kids or other kids, and good or bad. It's just like having kids and having to parent through issues just brings a lot of stuff up. Like I had no idea how bad my mom hurt when I was hurting as a kid. Like, it didn't cross my mind that my mom was sad too. Like, never would have thought.
No, because you don't think about your mom's feelings.
She doesn't have feelings. She's my mom.
Yeah. That's it. And it's so hard. And I think that's, having walked Caroline through the teenage years. I mean, when she was dealing with all this Mean Girls stuff, I was like, this is harder than it was when I dealt with my own stuff in high school, because I think you feel so powerless. And you're also watching the person you love most in the world go through something that you really can't do much about.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk first. How did raising Caroline kind of change your relationship, bring up some of this stuff, change your relationship with your mom? How did it change you as a person?
I mean, I think for me, it was, I think the genesis of like kind of realizing things about my mom, I'd always known things weren't right. I mean, my parents were divorced. It wasn't the healthiest of households. But I think when I got off to college, I started to realize like, oh, this is the way. I think that's when you start to be more aware of like what other people's families look like and where they come from. And I was like, this is not normal. Like, this is not normal stuff. And then as I got married, you kind of realize some more stuff. And then there is something about like when I found out that I was having a daughter, is I thought, wow, like, how do I want my relationship with my daughter to be different than what I had with my mom? I don't want there to be this weird competition. I don't want to feel like, she's responsible for my emotional well-being. Like, I want her to be free to be exactly who God created her to be. And how do I do that? And so it's kind of comes off in layers. But I think the biggest thing for me is once I became a mom, early on in Caroline's life, that's when it really became aware. And I talk about it in the book where I was like, I can't be the mom that I want to be. And I'm not going to be able to be emotionally healthy if I keep my mom in my life the way she currently is. It was just too toxic. It was too chaotic. And it almost became a thing of not just protecting myself, but I think it's different when all of a sudden you have a kid to protect, where I was like, I don't want any of this to affect my daughter. And so that's kind of when all those protective instincts kick in and you go, this has to be different. This can't go on like it is.
Yeah. So I feel like I've talked to so many people in the past, I mean, I guess since I became a mom, who feel like they're learning to parent because they didn't have good parenting modeled to them. And they're like, I just want to do better than my parents did. I want to break some generational curses, or just at least try to, I want to do better. And it's really hard because you really are starting from scratch if it hasn't been modeled to you. So what would your encouragement be if somebody is listening is like, yeah, I don't have a good relationship with my parents. I had a bad childhood. I will not do that to my kids.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's two things. I think number one, that's where you really need to pray. Like, God, I need your wisdom and I need your discernment to show me how to do this. Because I mean, there is as much as I wish I could offer you like a one size fits all, like healthy parenting map, so much of it is going to depend on your temperament and who your child is and the way you're raising them and all of that. So it's like, you really have to go to God and be like, I need your wisdom and discernment for how to parent this child. If you have multiple kids, I know this from my friends that do, that's going to look different for each kid. I mean, everybody's got all their different personalities and emotional leanings. So there's that. And then I think the other thing is, don't be afraid to draw a line where you need to draw a line and be like, we're going to do something different here. And to find, like, if you're in a church or a book club or at work or wherever, if you can look around, like what I really tried to do is find some women who I felt like had raised healthy daughters that look like some model of something that I wanted to create. And don't be afraid to ask those women, like, help me. I mean, I think there's a bunch of us older moms who would love to help younger moms and just be like, here are the things that we've learned and here is how to do it better. And so I looked for those women who I felt like had raised really good kids and wasn't afraid to ask them, like, hey, how do you do this?
Yeah. And you found them in church.
Yeah, I mean, church and neighborhood. I mean, some of it, my husband and I were in youth ministry in our neighborhood for a long time. So a lot of times it was the kids that we had, and then the kids. And so, go to dinner with those parents and be like, hey, you have a stellar kid. How did you do this? And you start to hear the same things over and over again. I mean, it's prayer, it's discernment, it's discipline, it's being their parent and not their friend. I mean, there are themes that stand out where you go, oh, these are some pillars of how you raise a good kid.
I want to talk about Caroline a little bit because a large chunk of what you talk about is her experience with Mean Girls and how that's shaped her and how you guys handled that and how that obviously brings up a lot of stuff. Like we said before, it brings up all sorts of hurt. So tell us a little bit about that part of Caroline's life.
Yeah, it was, it really didn't start. It's funny because we made it through junior high. And I feel like you always hear like, oh, junior high is the worst. Like it's the worst. And it's not great. I mean, it kind of is what it is. But I felt like for us, it was when we got to high school. And I had some older moms that had said, hey, things really start to shift when they get driver's license because all of a sudden they're free to make different choices and you start to see different friends make different decisions. And so we got to sophomore year and it just, you could kind of go back and go, what started it all? But I think it's just a lot of emotional immaturity. I think it's girls that are just trying to find their own place in the world and they just don't have a lot of empathy and kindness necessarily. And so it just kind of started this. Caroline found herself like so many girls have, where she all of a sudden was the one that everybody decided to go against. And they were talking about her. They would leave her awful texts. They would say awful things to her. They would corner her in the bathroom at school. And it was the craziest thing, because like, I am not one of these moms. Like I would always be like, did you do something? Like, have you done something? Like, what happened? Like, cause I'm like, I'm not going to be like, my kid's perfect. She didn't do anything. But she was like, no, I'm trying to talk to them. Like, I'm asking, like, can we talk? What happened? What's going on? And you just realize at some point, and it's like what I told her is, I was like, this really doesn't even have anything to do with you so much as it has to do with something that's going on with those girls. And so there comes a time where you have to stand up for yourself and you have to walk away and go, these are not my friends. And so it was a really, really hard time. And I think part of the reason I started writing this book was because I talked about it on another podcast years ago. And I had so many women that reached out, and either they had gone through it, their daughters were currently going through it, they had a friend whose daughter was going through it. And I was like, we have a mean girl epidemic. Like it's the thing that I don't know that everybody's talking about, but I'm like, it's a problem. And so what can we do in our homes? Because you can't control other kids, but what can we do in our homes to do better?
What do you think is like the cause of that? Because I think you're right. I think it is a problem. Is it a lot of hurting people? I always tell my kids, hurting people hurt people.
Yeah.
So that's like the first thing I say when they come home talking about like a bully. I'm like, well, who hurt? Like, how are they hurting? Let's figure that out.
That's it. And I think that's what it's from, is I think you have a lot of kids. I think if you don't have a spiritual compass, if you're not finding your identity in Christ, I think a mean mom is going to raise a mean daughter. I think if our kids see us prioritizing all these things, which the world tells us to prioritize, your academic prowess and what team you're on, and if you made A team or B team and all of that, I think we can start operating from this like scarcity mentality of somebody else's success means less success for us, instead of an abundance mentality of like, hey, just because you didn't make the soccer team, that just means God has something else for you. Let's be happy for our friends that made the soccer team, and let's go try out for basketball or band or whatever it is that is your thing. So I think that's a real big key, is I think our kids watch us to see, what do we value? What do we prioritize? What are we showing them? And we have to lead the way, because the bottom line is they are emotionally immature. Their frontal lobe has not developed. You know, they're it's a little bit of the Lord of the Flies mentality a little bit. So I think it's our job as parents to pour in and say, this is how you become a decent human being.
Yeah. Well, and kids are under so much pressure too. Like, it is like literally crawling their way to the top and taking down anyone they need.
It is.
Because like, you have to be at the top to get into college.
That's it.
To be at the top in high school, you have to be at the top in middle school. And if you're going to be in the top of middle school, then you better start playing soccer 7 days a week when you're in third grade.
That's right. Yeah. Or it's passed you by. It's sorry you didn't start gymnastics when you were 2. Your career is over before you're 8. You know, like, it's just the way it goes.
It's just too much.
Yeah. And we have to dial it down. And I think that's where, as parents, we have to recognize, like, where are the places where I'm trying to live vicariously through my kid, or get some sense of accomplishment from my kid that we aren't really meant to get from our kids. Like, we've got to let them be who God created them to be, and not what we want them to be, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I've said this on the show before, but my friends Jim and Lynn Jackson always say, your child is not your report card.
Yeah, that's right.
But we view them as our report. Or we have a vision of what, like, they're going to have a successful job, and they're going to get married. They're going to have 3 kids, and they're going to give me all the grandbabies, and everyone's going to live by me, and it's going to be great. You know, we can't write that story.
No, we can't. And the thing is if we force that story, we're missing out on the story God has for them, which is ultimately going to be the best story of all. Like, in our own lives, when you look and go, all the things that we thought we wanted versus what worked out the way it did, you're like, oh, God was doing something better. And so why would we want to force our kids into some box of what we think everything wants to look like and miss whatever God has for them? I mean, I think that's the great adventure.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, Melanie, because we like to be in control.
I mean, I said this year, I've been discovering, like, I thought I wasn't a control freak, but it turns out I'm not, as long as everything looks the way I want it to look.
Well, you know? Everyone's behaving the way you want them to be.
Yeah.
Let it go.
That's it. But they're not ours to control. And I think the more we try to control it, we miss out on the joy of it and kind of the faithfulness of God in it all, to just go, this does not look the way I wanted it to look, but let's see what's going to happen next.
Yeah. So your book, again, a lot of it is about relationships, whether they're good or bad relationships, friendships. I think in general, friendships are really hard in middle school, in high school. beyond. They're always changing. They come and go. And if
Mm-hmm.
we're lucky, we get a few that stick around. I have a few lifelong friends that I am just so blessed by. And there is one person who stuck out to me in your book,
Yes.
and that would be Gully.
Yeah, for
Yes.
sure. Yeah.
And your committed friendship. So
Yeah.
I mean, like through the highs and the lows, everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everyone just needs one friend.
That's it. You really do. Yeah. You need
So
one friend.
tell me a little bit about that. Because I think sometimes,
Yeah.
especially like in the stage of life I'm in, and just the age I'm at, that everyone's on social media and
Mm-hmm.
like you see everyone on their girls' night and you're like, I didn't get invited to girls' night or on their girls.
Yeah.
You're like, I didn't go on a girls'
Yeah.
I don't even have any friends. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
either you feel like you're missing out on a lot,
Yeah.
even though we may have moved past mean girl phase for the most part, there's still the missing out phase. But
Yeah, for
you
sure.
really just need one Gully.
Yeah, you do. And I think that's what's so, and I've always operated more that way anyway. Like I would rather have a handful of really close friends than, 100 surface friends. But Gully and I met when we were in college and we bonded over a lot of things. We both had a kind of a toxic parental relationship with a parent. So we had kind of our scars and our baggage from that. And I think because we had been through that, we just always agreed we were going to treat each other with the ultimate kindness. And that's what we've done for over 30 years now. So, and we were fortunate enough where we did end up and we kind of did the dream. We lived, a mile and a half away from each other. And she's got two boys that were raised like Caroline's brothers. And she's just been a loyal friend through it all. And that's a rare thing to have. And I feel so blessed to have it. But we've always been honest with each other. We've always said that we trust each other implicitly. I know she's not going to say anything behind my back. I'm not going to say anything behind her back. So there's just a level of trust there that I think is so important.
How do you think that you have navigated that relationship through 30 years of life looking so different? Because I feel like even some of my closest friends from a decade ago, we're now just in such different places that even though we love each other, we just don't get to see each other because that's just the way it works.
Yeah. And I think it's funny because I almost think it's a season. It's the seasons you're in because I can think with other close friends, because Gully and I have lived close to each other. And so we've stayed in each other's lives because it's been easy. And I mean, we prioritize, like when the kids were little, we were like, we go to lunch every Tuesday, and pretty much without fail, we didn't schedule hair appointments on Tuesdays. We cleared our calendars on Tuesdays like that. Because, if you don't, it's going to fall off the radar because it's that whole thing of you're just like, oh, I can't this Wednesday, I can next. The next thing you know, you're like, well, 6 months from now, I have a Tuesday that's free. So we were like, okay, every Tuesday we go to lunch. And those Tuesdays were just our time. Like we needed it. It was our free therapy session. It was our time to catch up. It was our time to talk about everything from serious issues to like, what lipstick are you wearing right now? Just all that stuff. But I also think that, with my girlfriends that are further away and that I don't get to see all the time, it's funny to me how as our kids have gotten older, we've all come back around. Like now, like my high school, some friends from high school that I have not really been with in, 35 years at this point. But all of a sudden, now that we're all empty nesters, everybody's like, when can we get together? Like, let's all get together. And so sometimes it's just a season where life is, when you're doing all the sports and the plays and the band practice and homework and all of that, it's hard. I mean, you have to prioritize friendship. And you also have to know that sometimes for seasons, it's just not going to be as easy to make stuff happen.
Yeah, not ideal. I think just in general, social media makes that so hard because you're like, oh, but everyone else is making it work.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's all a lie and we know it.
It is because you're
still
they're making it work because that's the picture you see the once a year that they make it work. It doesn't mean that it's happening all the time,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the struggle of social media as a parent and human in general is just always.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So for people who are listening, who are like, I'm struggling relationally, either with my parent or with my friends or my daughter's struggling. Life is stressful right now.
Yeah.
What would you say to them? Or kind of like, what would you say to yourself when you were struggling with so many different things? Like if you could talk to previous you.
Yeah. I mean, I think when it comes to relationships, I think you have to give a lot of grace. I mean, I just think you have to know, because here's the thing, like other than my mom, when I looked at all my other relationships in my life, I thought even when those people hurt my feelings or I feel slighted or we snap at each other or have a misunderstanding, I always trust and know that their intention is never to hurt me. You know, like it's like they're safe. And so even if they did hurt me, that wasn't their intention to hurt me. And so you kind of have to look and go, who are your safe people that you know, not that they're going to do it perfect and they're going to hurt your feelings and there are going to be times there are misunderstandings, but you know that they would never intentionally do that and it's not to hurt you, versus the people that you're like, this person is just toxic. Like this person is no good comes from this relationship. I leave feeling worse than I felt before I got here. I always feel uncomfortable. Like if you have those people where you're always second guessing and replaying, I mean, I think that's when you start to go, is this a relationship that I need in my life? And it's okay to decide some relationships are for a season. Like this served me in this season. It's not healthy for me anymore. And that's okay.
Yeah. One of the things that we've talked about at Christian Parenting, I think from Jeff and Tara Matson, there are some people who are on our podcast network. They talk about red light, yellow light, and green light friends. So a green light friend would be like a gully. Like you will trust them with anything. And like they're your go-to for sure. And yellow's like, you're a really good friend. I like hanging out with you, but I'm probably not going to tell you my deepest, darkest secrets.
Exactly.
And red is like, I probably don't need you in my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think visual.
Yeah, it is. And I think that there can be people and you can be like, you're not a bad person. We're just a bad match. Like this just, our dynamic is not great for each other. And that's okay.
Yeah. It's just hard when you're like a people pleaser or you want to just have like, you're just like gathering all the people and you're like, wait. You actually should be over here.
Yeah. No, you are not great. Yeah. Just this is not a healthy dynamic. Yeah. And that's okay.
Yeah. And it's hard for our kids too, because they have to learn that. I think it's really hard. I think helping our kids to identify who those people are and that it is okay to have different like categories of friends.
Yeah.
It's hard because our kids just want to be friends with everyone.
It is. Yeah. And I think that you kind of have to learn that. I mean, I think there's still, Caroline and I'll still have conversations about like, you've got your friends that are your true ride or die friends. And you have other people that it's like, they may be fun to go out with and they may be fun to go to the movies with. I would not trust them because I don't know that at the end of the day, they have your best interest at heart. And that's what you have to differentiate is not everybody is safe.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with a movie friend.
No, there's nothing wrong. Those can be great friends. You just have to, they're just a yellow light.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Okay. Love this. I mean, I really, truly loved your book. I love everything. There's so much goodness in there.
Thank you.
It is, it's a heavy topic, but it is also lighthearted. Like you're funny.
Yeah. Well, because we value funny. We prioritize funny. That's important.
Yeah. You did it well.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up our time, I do love to ask my guests, like, what is one thing that you want every parent to know when they leave this podcast?
I would say as an older parent, I'll say two things. I think number one, don't be afraid to let your kid be exactly who God created them to be. That's going to look different than what you thought. I talk about in the book, there were times when Caroline, she is so much more my husband's personality. And so like when she was navigating so much of that mean girl drama, like she just faced it head on. And where I was like, let's just be nice. Let's try to take the high road. Let's whatever. And that was fine for a while. But it was like at some point she had to handle it in the way that was true to herself. And I think that's when you get to see the gifts that God has given your kids, those unique gifts, really be on display. And so don't be afraid of those, even if it feels uncomfortable or different than how you would handle it. Like, watch what they do. And these are the years when they're under your roof where you can kind of steward it a little bit, where you're like, I love the way you approach that so directly. Maybe next time let's do it a little bit more gently, or whatever. So I think that's one thing. And the other thing is I just want to say, like, I know that there are times with kids where you feel like you're drowning and it's so much and you don't know how to handle stuff. But if you keep taking them to God and if you keep going to God, what I will tell you is it's all going to be all right. It's all going to be okay. And there are days where it feels like it's not going to be okay, but everything is for a season. And it's like, don't discount the way God is going to use these hard, difficult seasons that hurt you so bad to watch your kids struggle. Because what I have seen is all of that created in Caroline so much grit and so much resilience and so much empathy for other people that she wouldn't have had otherwise. So don't try to protect your kid out of everything that God's wanting them to become.
Yeah, I just love that reminder that when you do all those things, you're just taking away from God's story that He has written.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And we want to protect them because that's everything in us says to protect them. But sometimes we can protect them out of the very best of what God is trying to do in their life. So buckle up because it's not easy, but it is worth it.
Oh, Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time and sharing your heart with
Absolutely.
us. It was really, really delightful.
I love talking to you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Christian parenting.